Fáilte go Cultúrlann McAdam Ó Fiaich an seo ar mhór na bháil sa ceathrú géalteachta in iarthar firste. Tá Léacht ó giniu Léacht i éich le John Cooney, údar atá ag scríú leor fan Cardinal Tomás Ó Fiaich a bhfuil an Cultúrlann Ainmníodh as. Tá an teamach seo mar chuid de éile an phobal agus mar chuid de chláir speisialta imachtaí le ceileadh a dhéanú ar chrutha bliain ó bunaíodh an Cultúrlann. Bunaigh soltas. Welcome to Cultúrlann McAdam Ó Fiaich here on the Falls Road in the heart of the Gaeltacht Quarter in West Belfast. Today we have a podcast, Léacht i éich, the Ó Fiaich lecture with John Cooney, an author who's writing a book about Cardinal Tomás Ó Fiaich, after whom the Cultúrlann is named. We want to thank our sponsors, the National Lottery Heritage Fund, and our partners in this event, Féile an Phobal. Enjoy, bunaigh soltas.
Dear Gwitch, this is the second time that I have been invited to address Gaelgory, despite never being taught either Scottish or Irish Gaelic. I was born and grew up in the west of Scotland and was 25 years old when I came to Dublin in autumn 1972 as religious affairs correspondent of the Irish Times. In the Glasgow region, a linguistic speciality is speaking what comedian Stanley Baxter universalised as Parliamo Glasgow. Through BBC television, Baxter's spoofs on the Glasgow dialect became a global quasi-unintelligible variant form of English, a bit like COVID-19 today. My first Gaelic oracular occasion was on Bastille Day on July the 14th in the millennial year of 2000, when I was invited by Raymond O'Boyle to address a meeting of Grodom in Baia Athcliath on General Jean-Joseph Aimable Humbert's invasion of Ireland in August 1798. Raymond kindly helped translate my introductory remarks and Gaelic. This linguistic pragmatism prompted Liam O'Muraku, Radio Telefís Earn popular bilingual chat show Trom agus Airdom to congratulate me on speaking an Gaeilge as if I were discoursing in the native tongue of Carol Wojtyla, aka Ioannis Paulus in Latin, Giovanni Paolo in Italian, and Jan Paweł in Polish. In plain English, Pope John Paul II. Mog ban air, e vil le ra agam fui John Paul. Ba we William in Léacht Shaw, a óacht in ómós do trú inne a rá bers acu ochtaran na Earn, Mihal di O'Higgin, and Tahar Des Wilson, agus Chris Ryder. The great French novelist Honoré de Balzac said Daniel O'Connell incarnated a people. Similarly, I would contend that Tomás Ó Fiaich personified the Irish nation's Christian and Gaelic past, a world relating to the era of saints and scholars of the 6th to the 10th centuries. This is now a distant world, which present-day secular and multicultural Ireland barely recognises, except on the annual St. Patrick's Day festival with its parades nationally and among the worldwide Irish diaspora each March the 17th. Tom Fiaich was born on November the 3rd, 1923, beside the crossroads at Cullyhanna, a rural townland just north of the Irish border, near Crossmaglen in South Armagh, which was situated in the parish of Lower in the Archdiocese of Armagh. As the ecclesiastical see of St. Patrick, the Archdiocese was the standard bearer of fractured national unity in spite of and in defiance of the 1920-22 political partition of the island into a primarily Catholic free state of 26 counties in what was named as Era. This geographical carve-up contained a squabbling cuckoo of a Protestant unionist right 6 counties, quaintly called the province, and asserting allegiance to an imperial Britannia, which claimed to rule the world's waves. Tom's paternal grandfather, John P., was born in the immediate post-famine island at Shanmulla, County Louth in 1852. He seems to have worked as a ploughman for a navvy doctor in Freeduff, Craigenlower, Cullyhanna, where he met and married Rose Hughes of Old Town, Cullyhanna, in February 1882, when his age was recorded as being 30, and Rose was 10 years younger at 20. John and Rose had 3 children, Patrick, Tom's father, in 1882, James, 1885, and Mary Ann in 1888. Craigenduff Public Elementary School, a few miles from home, was opened in 1889, and the master by the name of Harold lodged with the fees. Patrick, Tom's father, trained in Drumcondra, close to the Archbishop of Dublin's palace. He qualified in 1904, returning to Craigenduff year as Master Fee. This was a substantial rise in social status for the Fee family. On January the 8th, 1920, Patrick married Annie Carraher, who had joined Craigenduff's teaching staff in 1911. Annie's parents were in the spirit grocery business. There is no evidence that Annie spoke any Irish. Thus, it might be said that this was a marriage joining the teacher's staff room with the drinks trade. The marriage duly produced 2 sons, Patrick in 1921 and Thomas James in 1923. Tom's uncle, Tommy Carricker, and his aunt, Elizabeth O'Neill, acted as sponsors at his baptism in St. Patrick's Church, Cullyhanna. Just days after Tom's birthday, Archbishop of Armagh, Michael Logue, died on November the 19th, 1924. Although Tom was too young to remember Logue, he grew up hearing hushed criticisms of Logue's lack of nationalist advocacy, though he was a moderate supporter of Home Rule. And my archdiocese was well provided with priests and public utilities. Besides a magnificent cathedral, there were 157 churches and chapels, with 140 secular priests and 36 regular priests, religious order priests. There were 2 colleges and 224 primary schools. In the Ó Fiaich Library in Armagh, there is a copy of a school textbook taught at Craigenduff National School. This Life of St. Columba or Columkill bears the signature of Thomas James Fee, not Tomás Séamus Ó Fiaich. A formative influence on Tom was Logue's successor, Archbishop Joseph McCrory from Ballygolly, County Tyrone, who established a reputation for being the hierarchy's most outspoken hawk against the evil of partition. A biography of Cardinal McCrory is long overdue. Sadly, in 1932, when Tom was not yet 10 years old, his mother Annie died. An aunt helped the widowed Patrick rear the 2 boys, but they were well off relatively and even had a motor car, one of the very few in the district. Also in 1932, the year of the International Eucharistic Congress in Dublin, Tom was confirmed by Rory. Another woman who was to play an important role in Tom's development was Mary Agnes Toner, who was appointed to succeed Annie as junior mistress. Later, she entered religious life, becoming Sister Columbanus in Bestbrook Convent. In 1936, Mary Agnes accompanied Tom on his first trip to Chalista Bridenarana na Fiachta, Donegal. She later recalled Tom's outstanding scholarly ability and his particular fascination, even at an early age, for the history of Cregan and the Irish language. A young assistant teacher at Cregan further stimulated Tom's interest in Irish and encouraged him to secure a scholarship to the Donegal Gaeltacht, where he forged a lifetime friendship with John Wilson from Cavan, who was later to become Taoiseach and Minister for Education in a Fianna Fáil government. World history was being made far away by Hitler, Mussolini, and Franco, as the young Tom absorbed a strong local culture. It was a great era for Irish music, it recalled. In the wintertime, you'd have a lot of céilíoing, local dances in the houses. We even had what we called decks, open-air cemented flat areas where people gathered on a Sunday evening. A couple of musicians would turn up and we danced away till near midnight, he told Lord Longford. Tom played the fiddle and the button accordion. Two townlands nearby were almost entirely Protestant, but there was apparently no religious tension in the area. Some of our closest friends were those Presbyterian families. One family in particular, called Nelson, was their name. We were constantly up and down to their house. People find it hard to believe about South Armagh, but I have never seen any religious bigotry there, he told Lord Longford. Rural pastimes were very simple. We used to go fishing for pike and perch in the local rivers. In the summer, we used to play skittles. Our house was at a crossroads, and all the boys used to gather there. From 1936 to 1940, Tom, aged 12, won an entrance scholarship to St. Patrick's. It was only in my last year at Armagh. I was sitting my senior certificate in 1940, and the president came round one day and said, I've got application forms here for Mainuth, and if any of you who are thinking of the priesthood had better fill up one. I hadn't thought about the question at all deeply, and I think I filled it more to leave that option open than anything else, he recalled. Tom's first trip to Croke Park was in 1937 when he watched Cavan play Kerry. So dedicated and Armagh supporter did he become that aged 17, he cycled from Cultúrlann to Coal Island and back to watch Armagh take on Tyrone in the first round of the Ulster Championship in 1941. The round trip was about 80 miles and Armagh were well beaten, scoring just 1 point in the game. Tom himself played only for a short time with his native club, Cultúrlann, in the 1940s, and then with Crossmaglen. Cultúrlann, he wrote, was the first local selection which gave me a chance to play the game that remained a great love. Owing to wartime restrictions, the Cultúrlann club folded in 1943, and there was no club operating in the parish. Thus, by default, he came to play for neighbouring Crossmaglen Rangers. Tom recognised his own limitations as a footballer, but he was selected nonetheless to play for the Rangers in the 1943 Armagh Senior Football Championship. We lost that day, but it's certainly the nearest thing I ever came to winning a senior championship medal. It was more or less the one-off thing, he recalled. Asked by Lord Longford if there was pressure at home to become a priest, he responded, "Not at all. Although there was a religious atmosphere about the house, we said the rosary every night. We looked on ourselves as very loyal Catholics. There would never be any question of missing Mass or anything like that." "What about girls?" Lord Longford pressed him. "Surely a young man so outgoing and gregarious must have had friends of the opposite sex." "Yes, I had," Tom replied candidly, "but I don't think any of them was serious, really. I liked dancing very much, both Cayley and old time, but while I had plenty of girlfriends and so on, I don't think I ever really had a serious kind of love affair." In 1940, Tom entered the portals of St. Patrick's Ainmníodh to train as a Sagart Arun. He was competent but not a high flyer in theology and philosophy, and he found that Irish teaching had deteriorated there since the 19th century. In 1944, Tom contracted pleurisy and was seriously ill. So ill was he that on his sickbed he heard the sacramental words for the dying being administered, and he believed his own death was imminent. But he rallied sufficiently to be allowed home to Armagh to convalesce. This meant, however, that he missed his class's ordination in Maynooth that summer. Tom finished his studies in St. Peter's College, Wexford, which was close to the sea, for his health. He apparently thrived there and made many new friends, one of whom was the future historian Nicholas Furlong. Of Tom's first day in St. Peter's, Furlong wrote, "A black-haired and yellow-complexioned seminarian, as thin as a filtered herring, evoked a shriek of disbelief among younger students in autumn 1945, when the college authorities explained that the newcomer from Armagh had arrived to improve his health. The St. Peter's grapevine had it that Mr. Fee of Armagh was a heap of brains and had nearly died in Maynooth." Tom was ordained a priest on June the 6th, 1948, a day best remembered for a Wexford rainy thunderstorm. Next day, he returned home to Armagh and celebrated his first Mass in St. Patrick's Church, Cultúrlann. At University College Dublin from 1948 to 1950, Tom Fee's skills as a historian were shaped by two fine Jesuit scholars, Father Aubrey Gwynn and Father John Ryan, specialising in the history of the 12th century church reform and Ireland's saints and scholars in continental Europe. Another teacher who was to give him a glowing reference in 1953, when he applied successfully for the post of lecturer in history at St. Patrick's College, Maynooth, was Robert Dudley Edwards. In 1950, Cardinal Dalton of Armagh authorised and arranged the funding of Tom Fee's postgraduate studies in history at the Université Catholique de Louvain in Belgium. Aged 26, Tom was embarking on a new and exciting phase of his life that was to broaden his appreciation of European culture in a difficult transitional period of recovery after the horrors of the Second World War. During his 2 years in Louvain, from 1950 to 52, he wrote home weekly to his father Patrick, providing a chronicle of his progress academically and an enthusiast of Ireland's contribution to European civilization. His first letter begins with a lively account of his first continental journey, written from the college Saint-Antoine-le-Vain, dated Monday, the 2nd of October, 1950. Dear Daddy, he wrote, greetings and good wishes from Louvain to all in Ainmníodh. We have arrived safely at our destination and are settling down to our new way of life on the continent. We left Dunleary a little late on Friday, and I went up onto the top deck and waved my torch. I don't know if you could see it or if there were other lights being waved. However, I did not like to continue too long in case it might be confused with some signals which the boat was sending out. We had a very nice crossing to Holyhead. The boat was packed, over 2,000 on board, and I heard that 200 more had been left behind in Dunleary. But I don't know whether this is true or not. We were steaming into Holyhead at 12 midnight. The crossing was very calm. You'd just think you were sitting in a restaurant at home where we had tea and cakes in the restaurant on board. When I had my office finished, a girl came up and said, "Hello, Father Fee." I looked at her, but who was it but Minnie McBennett's second girl, Kathleen, on her way to Rome? She was accompanied by a girl from Derrynooth, Peggy Clark, a nurse who said she had met Patrick. As there were no sleeping compartments available, we bundled ourselves up in rugs and overcoats and settled down for the night. We left Holyhead at 1:50 a.m. and sped through the darkness. The only special stops were at Chester and Crewe. The train was due in London at 5, and they told us that owing to the delay in leaving, we would not be in till 7:30. However, about 50 minutes out from London, we had to delay along the line and at times stop for upwards of half an hour. It was hard to sleep with the noise of the train. I think I snatched an hour before it got bright. As we approached the suburbs of London, it became quite clear that we would not catch the train for Dover, which was due to leave at 10 a.m. When we came to Wembley, we were told to change. As the train for Dover was to leave from Victoria, we had a lot of travelling in the underground and changing luggage. It was no joke to get my 3 bags, plus rug, plus umbrella, plus 2 overcoats, changed from train to train. But we managed without mishap, although we were very tired after it all, and of course we were still fasting. It was 11 o'clock when we reached Victoria Underground. Father McConville stayed in charge of the luggage, while I went up to see if I could get a porter who would bring up the luggage. The first man I met was Pat Morgan. He had been there from 9:30, and having given up all hopes, he was on his way out. We discovered that all trains for the boat were gone, and the next boat would not leave until 2:30 and would not get into Brussels until 10:45. As we thought this was too late for setting out for Louvain, we decided to stay in London for the night. We wired Louvain accordingly, and I wired Cambridge, which I hope arrived safely. Then we had our first solid meal from all the time since we dined in Cambridge on the previous evening. The next question was where to stay the night. London was crowded owing to the centenary celebrations of the restoration of the Catholic hierarchy in England and Wales since the 16th century Reformation. The next day, but Father McConville had the address of a McCoy's guest house, which we decided to try. The owners turned out to be from Crossmaglen. The man is the brother of the lame girl McCoy, who used to come to Crosschapel, and his wife is Garby from Clonalloch. We stayed there for the night and got a great do. Next morning, we said Mass at 7 a.m. in Westminster Cathedral, which was only about 7 minutes' walk. It is a magnificent building. I think that when it is, we no cathedral in Ireland comparable with it. The delay in London gave us a chance of a good sleep and also a short time for sightseeing. We visited Westminster Abbey, Trafalgar Square, the Strand, the Houses of Parliament and Westminster Bridge, and went to a picture, all on a Saturday evening. After Mass yesterday, we headed for Victoria Station and caught the 10 o'clock train for Dover. It was full of foreigners, hardly anyone speaking English. We got on the boat in Dover at 12:20. The sail to France was nice as the sun shone for most of the way, and we were able to sit outside. The sea, however, was very rough, huge mountainous waves part of the way, which rocked the boat up and down as if it were a little sailing boat at one point. And thus the diary goes on, and there are 3 years of fascinating letters to his daddy back in Anmar. Well worth reading, well worth quoting. Anyway, when Tom returned to Ireland, he was appointed to teach history at Maynooth, where he stayed from 1953 to 1977. A long stint. Tom's Morris Minor car was seen regularly during the football season when he came home to collect a team to travel to Clones or Croke Park for a football match. Tom often reminisced when he was growing up, fishing in Kiltabona Loch, cycling to Cullerville en route to Croke Park. Sometimes he climbed Bellows Hill in summer, from which he had a wonderful view of the surrounding countryside, such as his beloved Cregan, Slieve Gully and Mully-Lash Mountain in Monaghan, Corliss Fort and Liz Leitrim Fort. When he became Monsignor during his presidency of Maynooth College, he made a documentary, My Own Place, with Liam O'Muraku for RTE. In his Father Tom years from 1966 to 68, he became a media celebrity, appearing regularly on RTE television and radio, presenting history programs, for instance, on the 50th anniversary of the Easter Rising. For Ryark, he toured the continent, visiting places associated with the Irish monks, like St. Columbanus and St. Kilian. Indeed, the first time I met him at a joint launch by Veritas publishers of our books, mine called No News is Bad News, Communications in the Catholic Church, and his biography of St. Columbanus, the monk he described as Ireland's first European. This was in September 1974 in Donnybrook during a conference of the world's religious media. Tom made no secret of his admiration for Eamon de Valera. Indeed, the second time I met Monsignor Ó Fiaich was at Dev's funeral in Dublin's Pro Cathedral in August 1975. The Monsignor's laudatory sermon was in Irish, and I did not have a word of Irish. I was only too conscious of the fact that Donald Foley the news editor of the Irish Times, expected his reporters to be proficient in Irish. Sweating at the end of the Mass, I rushed to the sacristy to talk to Monsignor Ó Fiaich. I was very relieved when he handed me a neatly typed English version of his oration. It saved my bacon. I was thinking you would need this, he said, with that great laugh of his. Luckily for me, just prior to Dev's death, I had contacted the Monsignor to commission him to write a long article on the martyred Archbishop of Armagh, Oliver Plunkett, for an Irish Times supplement. This was due to appear in October to coincide with Plunkett's canonization in Rome, what I nicknamed irreverently as the Plunkett Junket. It was a week-long fun week in the Eternal City. As Joe Power of the Irish Independent, Tom O'Mahony of the Irish Press and myself were waiting at Fiumicino Airport for a return flight to Dublin, Monsignor Ó Fiaich greeted us. He was heading to Poland and was travelling light. He headed off for his flight to Krakow, carrying on his back a haversack, the priest pilgrim he was at heart. On top of his teaching and administrative duties at Maynooth, Tom Fiaich was the driving force in promoting reform, and he acquired a reputation for being an Irish language activist, which gave him an image as a firebrand, a reputation which he felt reduced his chances of being promoted to the purple as bishop in a northern diocese such as Kilmore in Cavan or Clogher in Monaghan. But his moment with the death from cancer of Cardinal William Conway in April 1977. Media spotlight immediately zoomed on him as the likely successor of Big Bill in Armagh's Aracheli at the height of the Troubles. For years, he had been using variants of the family name, Tom Fiaich, Tom Ó Fiaich, Thomas J. Fiaich, Tomás Ó Fiaich, even as Cardinal Conway almost exclusively called him Tommy Fiaich. It was important that one form should be chosen, now he was Archbishop, and adhered to. So upon his appointment to Armagh, a note went out from Jim Campbell's press office in Dublin announcing that the name was to be Cardinal Tomás Ó Fiaich, with an added explanation that whilst the written form was to be used as set forth, it was to be pronounced in English as Ó Fiaich. That solves the question I posed at the start, how Tom Fiaich became Tomás Ó Fiaich. Go raibh ma agad.